Okay, Dad, I just want to finish this game. Okay, Dad, I'm coming. Yeah, I'm almost at the end. What happened to summer?
Final Fantasy.
Yeah, Game Boy.
It ain't over till it's over.
Chill out, Dad.
Final Fantasy IV or Final Fantasy II in the West. I will forever call it Final Fantasy IV after being told a lie for the majority of my life, when I was a kid at least. And I hope you guys enjoyed that commercial. I love cheesy early Super Nintendo commercials. They're so good. So, Final Fantasy IV, this is a modern JRPG classic. Square Enix. Early Super Nintendo release, 1991 is when it came out, and the graphics show. Now, if you compare this to Final Fantasy VI, which I have reviewed on my channel, then graphically speaking, it is not as good. And that's alright. That's not going to take away from the gameplay, take away from the story. And let's get right into it. So you play as Cecil. I used to call him Cecil as a kid, believe it or not. And he's conflicted. He's basically told by his king to go take these crystals, and you're seeing a little, kind of like a cutscene here. And he doesn't want to do it. He doesn't think it's right. He actually stands up to the king, and he has to go off with his buddy Kane and basically deliver this package, and that starts the story. And this is a very basic, black and white kind of story, and Cecil basically finds out where he really came from. I'm not going to spoil anything from the story, but he basically finds out where he came from and his lineage and who he truly is. And he does change classes, quote unquote. He's a Dark Knight right now, and he is the leader of the Red Barons, which is a group of airships. And yeah, he is not the most complex character in the JRPG world. But still, I do like his story arc. I do like that he does change over time, and that there is kind of a little twist in the middle of the game. Now, if you are not familiar with turn-based RPGs, let's just say it's not for everyone, especially in 2019 when I'm doing this review. It's kind of archaic, and thankfully, you can actually play with active time battle. This was the first game to introduce that mechanic where you didn't have to wait. It was just a constant battle going on, and it made it more real. It made it more fresh, if you will, with the whole turn-based RPG format. And you basically have got to level your characters up. There's battles, there's random encounters, and that's the majority of the game. That's where you're going to be spending the majority of your game, is in battle and trying to figure that out and leveling your characters up, getting new skills, getting new armor, getting new weapons, finding new armor, and progressing through the story. Now, will you enjoy that? If you've never played Final Fantasy before, this is a good place to start. This is actually a pretty easy Final Fantasy, and if you play the actual Super Nintendo cart, Final Fantasy II, that is the easy type. We, as Americans, we got the watered down version, the censored version too, by the way. And the Japanese actually call this easy type in their country. So it is a good one to start off with if you want to get to the roots of Final Fantasy. And I do highly recommend that you play it. The graphics are, they're alright. But once you start getting into the story, into the characters, that becomes secondary. That does not take away from the gameplay, does not take away from the story. And that's where this game shines, is with the story, the characters, and the grinding does get a little old, especially for me that I've played so many JRPGs that it's not as fun as it used to be. And there's other options out there today that don't have turn-based, and I'm not a big fan of as much anymore. So let's talk about some other things that I absolutely love about Final Fantasy IV. I love the soundtrack. The original soundtrack is amazing. It's so awesome. The battle music, the overworld music. I love the overworld music. I actually play this in the background in my classroom where I teach quite often. And the kids actually really enjoy it. They really enjoy it. I listen to it on my personal time, when I'm editing, when I'm doing other things. And yes, it's superb. The story I've already brought up, it's pretty good. I like the wide cast of characters. And the cool thing about this Final Fantasy is you can actually have 6 characters in your party. And there are a lot of different characters. Now, the thing I don't like about the characters, you're stuck with that job class. You are stuck in that job class, except for Cecil, of course. And you're stuck with that for the rest of the game. Now, there's a few changes here and there with characters as they develop, as they quote-unquote get older. But you are stuck as a Dragoon, for example, if you have Kain in your party, which you will at the end of the game. And he's actually my favorite character in the game because of how complex he is and how basically he betrayed the party, betrayed Cecil, and then he's back. He's kind of on a revenge kind of story arc. And there's other good characters too. Edge is cool. The twins are cool. The old man Tella is cool. The Bard even. Spoony Bard. That's where you get that. You might have seen that meme. And Rose is good. And Cecil I've already talked about a lot. And even the enemies are pretty cool. I also really like the battle system for the most part. I love fighting the bosses. The bosses take up the majority of the screen, and there's some thinking behind some of the boss fights. It's not just mindless fight, push fight over and over until the battle's done. And you do have to grind in this game. Even on easy type, you've got to grind a little bit. And there's a lot of areas to explore. You get an airship. You get a spaceship later on in the game. And you actually explore the underground. You go visit the dwarves. And you do also go to the moon. And I'm not going to spoil why or what's going on there. And yeah, it's worth your time to track this down and to play it for sure. Now, how should you play Final Fantasy 4/2? So you have some options. You have the Super Nintendo version, which, I mean, you're going to spend about $30-$40 depending on where you look, where you get it. Loose, we're talking. You can also play it on the Game Boy Advance. I highly recommend that version. That's probably my favorite version to play it on. And they actually did another translation with it, which I actually like. And that's another little gripe you're going to have with the original Super Nintendo version, is that the translation is a little bit wonky. It's a little bit on the strange side, and it's an early Super Nintendo title, and it shows. So, but if you want to play the original first run of this, track down the Super Nintendo version. There's also the PlayStation 1 Final Fantasy Chronicles, which comes with Chrono Trigger as well. I do not recommend that version. That version is absolute garbage. And I'm going to tell you why. And I would actually say the same thing about Chrono Trigger packed in Chronicles. It's absolute garbage because of the load time. If you played the Super Nintendo version and then you played the PlayStation 1 version, it is atrocious. It is absolute trash. Going from screen to screen, battle to battle, it's so slow. It just slows the game down so much, and there's no need for it to be slowed down, in my opinion. So kind of avoid that. You can also get it on the PlayStation 3, the PlayStation 1 version. Don't get that version. Now, one version I'm not too familiar with is the PSP version. And that version actually comes with the After Years. which I'll talk about here shortly, but that version is actually pretty decent from what I've seen. Now, the After Years is a sequel that was released many years later. I actually played through it on the Wii when it was released on the Wii Shop, and it's okay. To me, it's just clunky at best. The tie-ins, it takes place after Final Fantasy IV, and the tie-ins to the story, tie-ins to what happens in the previous game is very, very clunky at best. The story's not good. The battle system's pretty much the same, and I don't know, but it is on the PSP version if you're curious. Another version that I don't really recommend, and it's just kind of a personal thing, I've actually heard good things about it, is the DS version, Final Fantasy IV, quote-unquote, remastered. And it's actually in full 3D, and there's voice acting. I'm not a big fan of the voice acting in that particular game. I tried to play through it. I actually got it a few years ago, tried to play through it, and oh man, that voice acting was terrible. I did not enjoy it, and graphically speaking, I wasn't a fan. I wasn't a fan of it. The battle system was there, it was decent, and the story's still going to be there, but I could not get into it. Now, I also have seen that there's a Steam version, which is a completely revamped version of this game, and I do not recommend that version either. You can actually get it on your smartphone, and the reason being, I just do not like the graphics. I do not like the graphics in that game, and I don't know, it just does not look good to me. So I highly recommend the Game Boy Advance version. It's pretty cheap. I think you can get it for like $20 or less. I have a complete in box, and I had it since day one. I'm so glad to have that in my collection. Now, let's talk about some other aspects of Final Fantasy IV that I just absolutely love, and is it worth your time? Is it worth your time to track this game down and play it? Well, it's going to take you anywhere from 25 to 40 hours to complete this game. And if you're trying to level your characters up to 99, it might take a little bit longer. And if you're trying to get some of those elusive items that you have to fight enemies over and over and over again, then yeah, it's going to take you a little bit longer to track things down. But I do recommend that you play through this game at least one time if you are a RPG hound, if you are a Final Fantasy fan. And especially if you start off with one of the later ones like 13, if you played any of the online games, if you played any of the re-releases and you're just curious, I do recommend it. And it's pretty easy to track down. It was a pretty popular game. I actually looked it up. It was like the 31st most selling Super Nintendo game of all time. It actually sold over 1 million copies. And that's pretty amazing for a JRPG. And Nintendo really not marketing this thing very well. And we didn't have any quote-unquote fans of RPGs, JRPGs in America. So yeah. And it would be worth your time, at least one playthrough. And especially to see the wonky translations at times, and to experience the story and the characters. And that's the main point I want to drive home, is that the story is good. And it's very vanilla. It's very black and white, but there are some good Final Fantasy-esque things in there. It's good Final Fantasy tropes. The Chocobos are in there. There's actually a fat Chocobo. Of course, random encounters are there. Your battles with the victory theme, the music, all that. And yes, you need to play it. Add it to your collection. And I do recommend it. Highly, very much so. And it will take you a little while to get used to it, especially if you're a younger RPG fan. But yes, track it down, find it, play it. Now, there's some other things I want to talk about with Final Fantasy, just in general, and where it's going. Final Fantasy 15 was a good game. I enjoyed it. It was different, and it did, quote-unquote, stick to its roots. A lot of random battles, a lot of random encounters, You have to explore. There's traveling involved. You have a party of characters. But I want to get back to its roots. The whole traveling in a car thing and kind of a punk-esque emo party, boy party was great and everything. But I want to get back to the roots. I want another Final Fantasy, not online, by the way, to play, where it's very story driven, and I know they quote unquote said with Final Fantasy IX this is going to be the last classic Final Fantasy, but I would like for them to go back and revisit kind of traditional Final Fantasy roots, traditional Final Fantasy tropes. And I know you're going to have all of that. There's always going to be callbacks to the classics. I understand that, but I think it's time. I think it's time. Nostalgia is always at an all-time high. Another thing I think Square Enix should do with these classic Final Fantasies, and they would make a killing. They would make an absolute killing. Make a Final Fantasy collection on the Switch, on the PlayStation 4, or even PlayStation 5, Xbox, and they would sell millions. You could do 2 or 3 different sets. I understand that they're re-releasing Final Fantasy VII. They did 9. They're re-releasing 12. And they're doing all this kind of in stages on the Switch. But if they did like a classic set 1 through 6, and then you do like 7 through 9, and then 10, 12, 13. You can exclude 15 in there, but you would have to put that in there too. You can almost have 3 separate sets, and I would be all right with that. You'd have 3 different volumes, and maybe even like a 4th one with like oddball titles, spin-offs. You can have the Game Boy games on there that were released. You can also have like the Kokobo dungeon games or whatever, the racing games. And I would be I would push for that. I would love that. And they would make a ton of money. A ton of money. And I understand you want to make your Tomb Raider games. You want to make your Hitman games. I get it. But do not forget Final Fantasy. Do not forget one of the best series of all time. And just don't forget your roots. I know Dragon Warrior, Dragon Quest, all that stuff's really, really popular too. But don't forget Final Fantasy and where you came from. So I'll leave you guys with this. I do recommend this game. The soundtrack, the story, the battle system, the characters, awesome. The price is pretty decent too to track one down if you're looking for a physical copy. If you want to go Steam, go Steam. But yes, you need to play Final Fantasy 2/4 and experience it for yourself. Alright guys, I'm going to leave you with the rest of this footage. I hope you enjoy it. This is the very beginning of the game. I haven't even talked about what's going on the screen, but this is the very beginning of the game. I'm actually fighting the Mist Dragon, the very first boss. And yes, enjoy the rest of this footage. And thank you guys for watching. What is your favorite part of Final Fantasy 2/4? What's your favorite part of the story? Who's your favorite character? Tell me down in the comments below. And also, what is your all-time favorite Final Fantasy? Let me know, guys. If you like this review, please like it, please share it. And also let me know if you want me to do more reviews like this. Alright guys, well, thank you for watching, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Present!